Pig news. And by pig news, what I actually mean is Chernobyl, kind of. Not really, but a little bit. So there was an explosion in Ohio. This is very important. This ties into a lot of stuff. We're gonna talk about this, okay? Let's get into this, all right? I know chat's bursting at the seams to share links, but you're gonna have to be a little bit patient. Drone video shows aftermath of Ohio train derailment, explosion. Drone videos, famous for not having audio. So what you're seeing here is not the ideal orientation of a train. I don't know how much train stuff you typically see, but they should not actually look like this. They're usually not on fire, and they do tend to be more or less stacked in a line. This is too zigzaggy. Now, any train derailment is obviously a massive issue. I mean, it's dangerous. People get hurt. People die. This one is especially problematic, though, because you see, this freight train was carrying some spicy materials. Quote, and by the way, this town is called East Palestine. It's in Ohio. A freight train derailment in East Palestine. No, that's not a joke. Near the Pennsylvania state line left a mangled and charred mass of boxcars in flames Saturday as authorities launched a federal investigation and monitored air quality from the various hazardous chemicals in the train. I'm going to loop this because I feel like a news presenter while having this play while I talk. About 50 cars derailed in East Palestine at around 9 p.m., carrying a variety of products. There was no immediate info on what caused the derailment. No injuries or damage to structures were reported. The post-derailment fire spanned about the length of the derailed train cars. The fire since reduced in intensity but remains active, and the two main tracks are still blocked. Norfolk Southern, that is the company, said 20 of the more than 100 cars were classified as carrying hazardous materials, defined as cargo that could pose any kind of danger, including flammables, combustibles, or environmental risks. Graham said 14 cars carrying vinyl chloride were involved in the derailment and have been exposed to fire. At least one is intermittently releasing the contents of the car through a pressure release device as designed. This time, we're working to verify which hazardous material cars, if any, have been breached. Vinyl chloride, used to make the polyvinyl chloride hard plastic resin used in a variety of plastic products, is associated with increased risk of liver cancer and other cancers. It goes on to talk about a variety of potential risks. Safe to say, there's a lot of dangerous stuff on board. But something that's interesting about this is that, as I understand it, there's an unusual level of secrecy going on at this here derailment site. Reporter arrested during news event on Ohio train derailment. You see, they evacuated the entire town of East Palestine. The whole town's out of there. A reporter was pushed to the ground, handcuffed, and arrested for trespassing while covering a news conference about the derailment of a train carrying toxic chemicals in Ohio. News Nation posted video of correspondent Evan Lambert being arrested Wednesday in the gymnasium of an elementary school in East Palestine, where Governor Mike DeWine was giving an update about the accident. There has been... Now, chat, correct me if I'm wrong. We still haven't actually gotten a report on what breached. Have we? Some of the stuff on the trains has been identified, but the actual specific things that have been breached haven't been. Is that correct? Okay, just making sure. That's what I saw from before. Whew.
Please. You guys, he's a national correspondent. You cannot do this.
I'm a reporter with News Nation. It's all being recorded right now.
This is horrible.
Because you can't talk to people about doing their job.
It was carrying Twitter leftists, the most toxic substance known to man, precisely. Whew. Yeah, that was quite the fire. Look at that. Uh-huh. Apparently, a lot of people's pets have died. People's pets are dying in their houses, presumably because there is some kind of leak. I mean, we know there's something. I just don't know how much information has actually been released. Story on the animals, it's very sad. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Health concerns mounting as animals become sick after train derailment. Show the rest their faces. Well, that's too sad, Vermin. Too sad. Health concerns growing in East Palestine as reports rise of animals getting sick and some even dying The train derailment is causing struggles not just for the animals, but their owners as well. Let's see. So he said all the foxes have been sick and acting differently since the weekend. Some have had abnormally puffy faces. There you go, vermin. And are not eating properly. Many are dealing with stomach issues and acting lethargic. They're weak. Some died just immediately. Yeah, anything that can do that to a fox can probably do something to a human. This is industrial negligence, isn't it? It is, and we're going to get to that. I just wanted to initially establish just how bad this has gotten. I mean, past the evacuations, this was updated on the 7th, 3 days ago, so this is not immediately up to date. But the main issue seems to be that we don't really have a good read on what the environmental damage is, despite the fact that by now, presumably, Norfolk Southern has been able to identify which cars have been breached and to what extent, you know? It's been several days. By now, we can reasonably assume they know what's been released. And I have a feeling that an effort is being made to weight or downplay things as much as possible. I mean, that's kind of like the classic post-chemical spill attitude of a company. You know, it's not the first time something like this has happened. I'm just interested in seeing how bad it actually gets. I mean, East Palestine isn't exactly a totally undeveloped area, as you can see. You know, people live here. And if it need be, semi-permanent evacuation of a town is a pretty goddamn big deal. But it's not just about the chemicals. It's also about how the chemicals ended up there. Here, shortly before the derailment in East Palestine, again, no idea why it's called that, there were lobbying efforts by Norfolk Southern and other railroad companies for the right to carry hazardous and flammable materials on trains with outdated braking systems, while slashing their workforces by about 30%. See, trains and train networks are old and reliable technology for the most part, but braking in particular has come a long way, a long, long, long way since the original laying of our train infrastructure. And the idea of carrying like thousands of gallons of toxic chemicals on more than a century-old braking tech is a little bit strange. Here, documents show that when the current transportation safety rules were first created, a federal agency sided with industrial lobbyists and limited regulations governing the transport of hazardous compounds. The decision effectively exempted many trains hauling dangerous materials, including the one in Ohio, from the high hazard classification and its more stringent safety requirements. Amid the lobbying blitz against stronger transportation safety regulations, Norfolk Southern paid executives millions and spent billions on stock buybacks, which, remember, is effectively the same as just giving billions of dollars to your board of directors, all while the company shed thousands of employees despite warnings that understaffing is intensifying safety risks. Norfolk Southern officials also fought off a shareholder initiative that might have required company executives to assess, review, and mitigate risks of hazardous material transportation. Vaush didn't read the rest of the text, but the person was at meetings and stuff, and they apparently removed chemical detectors on the train, and the workers there were striking just weeks ago. Yeah, those might have been the very labor strikes that Biden shut down. How nice of him. You guys know how trains are good and we don't use them enough? You've heard about this. You've heard these rumors. I'm waiting. Yeah, okay. So, problem is, much as you may have heard about the death of rail, existing rail industries are actually sickeningly profitable. See, there are lots of things you can do with rail, some more profitable than others. Commuter rail, for example, is not as profitable as like direct, short, like one point to one point, like high load freight carrying. That's like a very high profit margin for any run with a train. Whereas managing passenger rail, it gets finicky, you know, people shit in train cars. It's a whole mess. What we've seen is that companies like Norfolk Southern have, through stringent deregulation and constant cutting of their workforce, have been trying to milk as much of a profit margin as possible out of a very limited range of things that they think trains are good for. See, people will tell you that under the current system, trains aren't profitable when they're run for commuter rail. They're not profitable when they're run for this or that. How can trains be profitable? We all know that trains have been on the way out for like a century. How can they possibly be profitable? In reality, the profit margin for trains is disgusting. Norfolk Southern Railway came away with $10 billion in revenue back in 2020. There is not a lack of money to be made here. The problem is they just focus on maximizing the profit margins on the thin, like the set of things they actually want to focus on. One of them being, of course, the transportation of hazardous chemicals, direct back and forth. They make a lot of money off of that. And the best way they can maximize their profit margin on those limited ventures is, of course, fewer regulations and pay less wages. This is what we saw, with the rail strikes that Biden shut down, where, the rail companies aren't even willing to give like sick days to their workers. Hell, did you know that some of the rail companies are actually talking about making it so that trains run with only one person rather than two? That's not a joke, okay? Think about a train, okay? A train is not a car. A train is hundreds of tons of machinery. Just an enormously powerful and complicated machine, maintained by two people, a conductor and an engineer. And together, they are the ones in charge of making sure that train runs on time, to make sure that it runs properly and safely, and so on and so forth. There have been talks of having it so that a train has one conductor, and sometimes there will be a guy following the train by car, sometimes multiple trains, and if the conductor has a mechanical issue, they can call that person by car, and that person can show up and help with the train. This isn't a joke. That is actually a thing that has been bantied about as a possible solution, because it would allow one guy in a car to be the collective engineer of several trains at a rail yard as they run parallel or at least roughly near each other. Leaving aside the fact that trains often run through cellular dead zones, meaning that it would be completely impossible to contact anyone, and the fact that that's psychotic and completely insane to not have the engineer on board, this is how far they're willing to go to cut down on their losses. This is how far they're willing to go to maximize profit. Personally, I think every train should have 60 people on board. Not for commuter rail. I just mean 30 conductors and 30 engineers. Have them all crammed up there in the front cabins. I don't care. That's socialism. In 2017, after rail industry donors delivered more than $6 million to GOP campaigns, the Trump administration, backed by rail lobbyists and Senate Republicans, rescinded part of the rule that made better braking systems widespread on the nation's rails. Specifically, regulators killed provisions requiring rail cars carrying hazardous flammable materials to be equipped with electronic braking systems to stop trains more quickly than conventional air brakes. Norfolk Southern had previously touted the new technology, known as ECP brakes, for its potential to reduce train stopping distances by as much as 60% over conventional air brake systems. Do you think conductors and engineers have sex with each other on the job? I bet they do. I bet so as well. Evil, they're just evil? Yes. If I recall correctly, originally the brakes on a train would be like a mechanical lever that you would have to flip, and it would only work for that train. That car in the train. Meaning if you had like a 10-car train and you wanted to hit the brakes, you would have a guy with big shoulder muscles pull a giant lever switch on the front one and then run to the second one and pull another one and then run to the third one and pull another one as many times as they needed to actually sufficiently bring it down. And air brakes, I think, use a air hydraulic system to brake the entire train at once, which, as you can imagine, makes things a lot easier. And then electronic brakes are electronic. They're cool. They're disco, all right? They're cyber. They're awesome. They're poggers. No, every car had its own brakeman? Never mind. That makes a lot more sense. Apparently, every car in old trains had its own brakeman. So you really would have 60 people on the train. You would just have them all one-to-one in a car, next to each other in a line, and then, somebody would scream brake, and they would all just flip it. That is communism right there. That is good. Would ECP brakes have reduced the severity of this accident? Yes, Stephen Dittmeyer, a former senior official at the Federal Railroad Administration, told The Lever. The railroads will test new features, but once they are told they have to do it, they don't want to spend the money. Norfolk Southern did not answer questions about its efforts to weaken safety mandates. Oh, hey guys, in case you wanted a little treat, just so you know, they're trying to do the exact same thing for planes as well. Planes used to require 3 people in the front cabin. They would have pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer. They got rid of flight engineers. Now it's just pilot and co-pilot. And they're trying to get rid of co-pilots for short ones. One guy, certain airplane models required 3 people in cockpit, not all. Yeah, for larger ones. But nowadays, for larger flights, flight engineers just aren't a thing anymore. Will that make labor struggles harder or easier? A lot harder, I would say, in my opinion. The FAA would never allow it. Do not make any bets on what any federal regulatory agency will allow when it comes to the profit margins of a company. The interesting difference being that airlines actually run on incredibly tight margins. I mean, I'm pretty sure that like the profit margins on what Norfolk Southern and other train companies do are many times higher than that of airlines, because planes are, as it turns out, quite expensive. And while trains are as well, trains are a lot simpler and a lot less expensive than planes are, by far. Yeah, aviation relies on government subsidy. Otherwise it just would not exist, or they'd have to raise the prices, which I think they should do. Norfolk Southern did not answer questions about its efforts to weaken safety mandates. The company also did not answer questions about what kind of braking system was operated on the train that derailed in Ohio. Oh, right, okay, so that answers the question right there, doesn't it? Would not answer question about what kind of braking system was operated on the train that derailed in Ohio. You know for a fact if those had been electronic brakes, they would have immediately been like, no, we adhered to the highest degree of safety and standard. You know. A spokesperson for the agency confirmed to the lever the derailed train was not equipped with ACP brakes. Well, there you go. Are companies forced to increase profits even if it leads to worse products due to a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders? Yes. When it comes to stuff like trains, there's not really a way to improve trains that much. I don't want to sound defeatist or anything. With existing rail infrastructure, working with the systems we already have, trains can only go so fast. There are diminishing returns to higher rates of speed and different types of... They've already pretty much like maxed out. They've pretty much optimized the amount of money that you can get on a train. Like, trains are nearly optimized. So how do you continue to increase profits? Because keep in mind, if you're a shareholder in Norfolk Southern or somebody who just buys shares, you're doing it because you want those shares to appreciate in value, right? Whether you have just 10 shares in Norfolk Southern or 10 million, you want those shares to go up in value, correct? I mean, that makes sense. But it won't do that if the company just continues to maintain its current level of efficiency. The company has to grow. One of the ways you can get your shareholders more money without actually growing the company is by spending your profits on stock buybacks, which is what a company does when they buy back their own stock. When they buy back their own stock, they assimilate it into the company, therefore making the remaining stock on the market more valuable. So if there are, say, 10 billion shares out there, they buy back 1 billion of them. The remaining 9 billion now represent the proportional worth of that company's evaluation on the stock market. Yes, this was illegal until Reagan made it legal, just so you know. And as a product of that, they can actually increase the value of their top shareholders' stocks without increasing the worth of the company directly. But still, in optimized systems, a growth-centric model still needs to grow. The vast majority of the nation's trains continue to rely on a braking system first developed in 1868. Trains equipped with these traditional air brakes make emergency stops more slowly and with a higher rate of damage than trains equipped with ECP brakes, according to both safety advocates and the Federal Railroad Administration. While air brakes stop train cars individually as air pressure moves sequentially from one car to the next, ECP brakes operate much faster using an electronic signal. So keep in mind, these guys are so unwilling to slightly widen their profit margins, or sorry, to spend even a little bit more money, to spend something like ECP brakes. This would not be that expensive to implement. We're talking about, hey, what if we used electronics to brake? This is not like revolutionary, you know? But hey, even that would cost some money, and that would mean less money for stock buybacks. And we will see what ends up happening with the cleanup. I mean, it really depends on what chemicals were on that train and which got breached. No matter what turns out to be the case, we just have to understand this will continue to be a problem, an increasing problem, as long as we allow Norfolk Southern and other rail companies to skirt by on regulations. An ECP is around 88,000 per train. 88,000? They're afraid of 88,000? That's it? per train? 10 billion revenue? Okay. That one stock buyback they did would have been enough to update their entire train line. All right, that's enough. Close it.